Time to Unpack talk show. I am your host, Tiffany. Today, we'll be talking about healthy mind spaces. How do we cultivate and create them? To help us with the discussion today, I want to welcome to the show Dr. Cerrissa Hugie. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, sis. It's just such an honor to be here, and thank you for sharing your platform with me. That's so gracious of you.
Oh, no problem. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So let's talk a little bit about, you're getting ready to launch your book, Cultivating and Creating Healthy Mind Spaces. So first, let's talk about mind space. What exactly is mind space, and what does the acronym stand for?
Absolutely. So MYNDspace is an acronym for My New Direction. And one of my friends and I, we were just kind of talking and we were playing with words and trying to figure out, like, what are we going to call this thing? And she was like, what about mind space? Or, we just were playing with some things. But a mind space is basically all of the things that make up a person's mental and emotional wellness. So internally, our thought processes, our emotions, our perceptions, and then externally, our relationships, our environment, our work and living spaces.
Oh, awesome. And so mind, I thought it was very catchy that you spell it M-Y-N-D.
Yes.
Why did you choose that spelling?
Oh, so that spelling is my new direction,
Ooh.
my new destination, my next destiny. It could stand for so many things, but I feel like when people make a choice to prioritize and be intentional about their mental and emotional wellness, then in making that choice, they might be choosing a new direction, the next destination. It empowers them and it speaks to their own ability to take charge of their mental health.
Okay, that's good. I love that. And so in going in new directions, in embracing new opportunities, in trying to do something new, in your book, I love this process that you highlight to cultivate and create. And I know in cultivation, just in a layman's situation, how you cultivate land and soil, and you get it ready to produce a crop. But how do we translate that to cultivating the mind?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question. And it's funny because in the book, I talk about the word cultivation as a farming term. And I use the analogy of a farmer doing the things that are necessary to not only start the growth of a new crop, but also to sustain that crop. How does this crop, how do we remove the things that are in the ground that would hinder this crop from growing, but also adding things to the soil as well that would nurture the soil so that crop, so that you can produce. So create then is really about producing. And so I believe that we all have a unique capacity and a unique contribution that God has called us to make to this world. So it's important for us to do the things that are necessary that would allow us to produce. Kind of like the command being fruitful and multiplying. I don't believe that that's just related to children, but I believe that we all have a seed on the inside of us that we are supposed to plant in the earth, and it's supposed to produce, grow, and flourish. But if the soil of our lives, if the ground of our lives is not set up to sustain that growth, then either we're going to grow too fast, right? Because we're going to take on too many things at once, and we're going to grow too fast, and then it's going to die. Or we won't produce anything at all. So that's why it's important. And one of the things that God spoke to me about mental health, because I was wondering, like, what does mental health have to do with our spiritual life? At the time that he called me, it wasn't as prevalent of a conversation as it is now in church settings. So one of the things the Lord spoke to me about was all the scriptures in the Bible that have to do with the mind and how your mental health really affects every aspect of your entire life. So the book, Cultivating and Creating Mind Spaces, is really tying a person's mental health to their ability to fulfill their purpose. Yeah.
So I get it. So just an example, when we talk about cultivating the mind, let's use an example of maybe a traumatic experience. How would someone cultivate, or what process could they use to cultivate in that scenario?
Absolutely. So emotional awareness, I think it all starts there, right? Understanding your triggers, understanding your emotional capacity, your limitations, even being able to assess how you feel about a certain situation. Because trauma does one of two things. It either makes us hyper vigilant, it hyper arouse, it causes us to have a hyper emotional state, right? We're reactive instead of responsive. Or it can make us numb,
Right.
where we're really not responding appropriately to stimuli that happens or things that happen within our environment. So in terms of cultivating and creating a healthy mind space around trauma, is first even understanding how the trauma has affected you both internally and externally. And another thing that we understand about people who experience trauma is they often, because they're used to that chaos, they duplicate that in their life, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that I say is you have to have alignment between what's internal and external. So you're a therapist, right? So
Yes.
you do all this breakthrough work with a client, and you're excited because they just come to this pivotal realization, but then they leave your office and they're involved in a toxic relationship.
Yes.
Right? Or an environment, a work environment that ends up triggering them. So then they come back to therapy and they have all the progress you have made, they're set back.
Undone.
Right? So again, creating the external environment, right? Cultivating relationships that are going to be healthy for you, that are going to cause you to heal and grow. So that's why the internal and the external have to align.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And in your book, you talk about a 3-step process that I thought is very simplistic and very easy to follow for someone that's willing to start doing the work. And it's ask, assess, and analyze. Let's talk a little bit about that process.
Absolutely. And it's crazy because this is just the way that my brain is wired, is to really assess what's happening internally for me. Like, why is my body language changing? Like, why do I all of a sudden feel stressed or I can't concentrate? And so the first question I'm asking, like, what am I feeling right now?
Right.
Right. So we're asking, right? And then we're assessing, like, where is this coming from?
Right.
What is the challenge that I'm facing right now? Is it an external challenge or is it an internal challenge? And then analyzing, what is the source, right? Where is it coming from? Who is it coming from? Is there something in the environment that's affecting me? And I think that change really begins with awareness. Right? We can't fix something that we're not aware of.
That's right.
Right. So asking yourself that question, not just when you're having negative emotional experiences, but also for positive, because your awareness allows you to self-regulate. If you're not aware of something that might be triggering you in your environment, you can be very reactive. You can cause a lot of conflict and have difficulty cultivating healthy relationships. So it's important that self-awareness is important. It's key.
Yes, I agree. And even before you start that process, being able to accept the truth about ourselves.
Yes.
How important is that you have to be willing to, it's a saying that we say, you cannot conquer what you don't confront.
Come on.
So in your book, you also talk about giving yourself the permission.
Yes.
Why is permission so important?
Permission is extremely important. One of the things, and I don't know if you experience this clinically, when I have a patient sitting in front of me, almost always they're saying things like, oh, I should not be feeling this way. I should be over this by now. I can't believe I got this upset about this and that. We always want to be where we're not. Right? And so oftentimes when I ask them the question, if you had someone that was experiencing the exact same thing, what would you tell them? And almost always it's a compassionate answer.
Right.
It's an answer where they're giving that person permission to feel whatever it is that they might be feeling.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, we have a difficult time doing that for ourselves. Right? We have these unrealistic expectations. Just because you want to be over it,
that's right,
doesn't make you right. So you're spending all of this time perseverating over what's not the case. Whereas if you give yourself permission, then you can heal, because you can only start where you are. And I think so many of us delay our healing and delay our growth because we're stuck, simply because we do not give ourselves the permission to be vulnerable and to heal.
Great. That's really good. And we all come to like a pivotal point in our lives, whether it's we're trying to approach purpose, we're trying to finally live in purpose, we're trying to be healthy and whole, even if we're desiring a healthy relationship. So
Yes.
this process is even almost mandatory if we want to be in any type of healthy relationships. Um, so, what would you say was a pivotal moment where you found yourself having to say, "Ah, I need to go through the cultivation process"?
Oh man, which you got time?
Yeah,
Do you have
give us just
time?
one. Give us just one.
Right,
Give us
right.
one.
So I think part of my story that I share in the book is about our 12-year journey with infertility. And I think for me, being in certain faith settings where I would often tell people I was struggling emotionally, and they would say, "Oh, you just need to trust God," right? And tell me whatever scripture. And so it really didn't give me the space to actually feel what I was really feeling, right? And
Gotcha.
so I was burying and suppressing these emotions because I felt guilty about the fact that I was angry
Yeah.
with God, or just all of the challenges. I was angry or disappointed that my life wasn't what I had expected it to be at the time. And so really it just caused me to self-sabotage in a lot of ways, and it caused me to be stuck. And so when I got to the point where I was willing to be vulnerable and I was willing to say, "Okay, God, this is what's going on with me." The scripture says that we should worship him in spirit and in truth. And I think we spend so much time focusing on the spirit that we forget about the truth.
Yes.
And we think that he can't handle our anger, our shame, our disappointment, whatever it is that we have going on.
Right.
And so instead of running from the pain or trying to suppress it or deny it or feeling like my pain somehow was unholy, that release, that allowing that vulnerability allowed me to now invite God into those spaces, invite him into my pain. And that's when my healing begun. No, it didn't mean, because we still had to go through 12 years, right?
Right.
So it didn't mean I was just, wonderful and I enjoyed every aspect, because then I was vulnerable, but it allowed me to take each day as it came and to allow good days and bad days. And just whatever came, then that was how I was able to walk through that process and be present, because there
Right.
were lessons in the journey that I needed to learn that were
That's
pivotal
it.
to even me being able to sit in front of you today.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, different, but even for me to go through a cultivation process, mine was a little different, in which I used to feel bad about my giftings that the Lord gave me. So I would go through depressions and get very upset and very emotional, and which caused me to start hiding who I was created to be.
Yeah.
And so even with, like you said, going into the creation phase of actually extracting and becoming who it is that you were designed to be,
Yes.
I had to do the work to say, okay, where did this mess come from right here? That's
Yeah.
making you feel like, I literally cried one night and I said, God, why did you give it to me? I didn't ask you for anything. I'm tired of people treating me a certain way. I didn't ask you for any of the gifts I had. Why are people backing me into corners and trying to cover me up in every setting? So then I have to do the work to figure
Yeah.
out where that came from, dig it up out of my soul,
Yeah.
throw it out, and then find those necessary ingredients to put back in. Find those mentors that can pour into me.
Yeah.
Find those different qualities that was necessary for me to walk in who I really am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm sharing that because I know that other people go through the same thing. But in any type of scenario, cultivation and creation can be applied.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's often seasons of discontentment that really cause us to wrestle with who we were created to be. And I feel like, as I often say, that emotional wellness is a lifelong journey.
That's right.
And I feel like a lot of it is just peeling back the layers, right? Of all of the life experiences, all of the things that were spoken over us that were contrary to who God called us to be, any environment that we were put in that where our growth was stunted. It's a process of just removing the layers.
Yes.
And then we can show up bold.
Oh, yes.
Listen,
Oh,
and it doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be pretty, but you're
Yes.
going to get Dr.
Okay.
Hugie today.
There you
You
go.
might get petty Dr. Hugie.
There you go.
You might get professional Dr. Hugie. You might get compassionate and encouraging Dr. Hugie, but you're going to get Dr. Hugie.
There you go.
Okay?
There you go.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all of those different versions are necessary.
Yes.
They're all necessary.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and to be in a place now where I can truly embrace who I am is wonderful. All the things that I am and all that I am not. You know, because the other thing about me is I would struggle with what I didn't have, right? You know, what I'm a people, I have the gift of relationships. I'm good at building and cultivating good relationships. But, you know, one of the things I was talking to my husband about earlier was, you know, I don't really know how to iron, you know, but is that really necessary,
Throw it in the
right?
dryer.
And I would struggle with, like, I'm not good at crafts and, you know, I'm not creative like you with my hands and all of those things. And my gifts, other than singing, I don't really have any external gifts, right? But, you know,
so
the
you
Lord
think.
had, so I think,
Okay.
right? But the Lord had to really, because I struggle because I have a daughter, right? So I'm like, well, how am I going to teach her, you know, this things and that things that mom should be? But, you know, God had to show me that what I had to give her was still valuable. Her character, her integrity, all of the things, like her ability to embrace who she is.
Yes.
You know, that is what I give my children. They're geniuses, right? You know, because, you know, their mom is awesome. So, but that's what I give them. And so what if I can't, you know, teach them how to iron their clothes? They got their daddy can't help them. Do that. You know, but I would be I would be ashamed of that, you know, because there's certain things, being able to produce children, right? You know, there are certain things that we define ourselves by, which really they're not who we are. They're just roles that we happen to play. So if you know who you are, then you can show up and be fully present no matter where you are.
No matter where.
Right, no matter what role, because the roles are going to change.
That's right.
Right? The roles will change, but who you are should be the same.
Should be
yeah,
the same.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. So we talk about emotional awareness. So how would you respond to someone that says, well, Dr. Hugie, I really don't know how to tap into these emotions. I don't even know what I'm feeling. I think I'm numb. How would you respond to that?
Oh, man. So I've been numb. Yeah. In fact, I still have a little bit of a delayed emotional response, right?
Okay.
It could be a crisis going on. And then, like, after it's over, I'm falling apart. My husband's like, what's happening? I'm like, you know, the day just, you know, is wearing on me now. Like, this week was just really stressful.
Just hit you.
But you wait till Friday to act crazy, right? So, but truthfully, you know, you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be intentional. It's okay to compartmentalize, because I think that we need to do that. And I think sometimes what we do in survival mode is maladaptive when we no longer need to survive and we need to shift to thriving.
Ooh, that's
right?
good.
So that numbness might have been necessary for a season so that life would not overcome you or the circumstances would not overwhelm you. But now the numbness is keeping you from experiencing the true joy and, you know, the true fulfillment that you can experience in your life.
Yes.
And so just being intentional about tapping in. I talk about a forbidden emotion, right? Because we all have it based on our family of origin or messages that were communicated to us. For me, that forbidden emotion is anger, right?
Okay.
I don't want to tap into anger because the way that I've seen it is explosive, right? It's a trigger for me.
Right.
You know, so when I'm mad about something, like I really, like it's okay to be mad.
Yes.
All emotions are good.
Good.
All of them, right? And they serve a purpose. But sometimes because of what we've seen, you know, maybe you cry a little bit too easily and and you're a man, so it's been communicated to you that crying is weakness.
That's right.
And so that's uncomfortable for you. So there's all of these things. They're not truly who we are, but they're messages that we've received.
You've been numb for so long. How do you actually stop and say, it's okay to feel that?
Yeah. It's the permission. It's the permission. I think that's the key, because permission to feel gives us permission to heal. So that the ask, assess, and analyze process can help with numbness too. Yeah, it can be applied there too.
Good. And so how does the emotional vulnerability, how does it lead to great change or get us to the place where we are able to create.
It's the starting place. One of the things that I share with some of my patients when they're getting ready to go through trauma therapy, and I love this analogy because for whatever reason, like the light bulb goes off for them. I liken it to when you're getting ready to have surgery, right? And the doctor tells you you have whatever else going on inside of you, and they need to do this surgery, right?
Right.
And so if you've ever had surgery, you know that the hardest part, because you sleep for the surgery.
That's right.
You don't know what they did, right?
Yeah.
But the hardest part is the recovery, whether it's the 8 weeks, the 16 weeks, because that is where you start to really feel the pain and you wonder why you even started the process in the first place. You feel worse than you did before you had the surgery often. But on the other side of the recovery is the healing.
Yes.
Maybe you're able to function greater than you functioned prior to the surgery. But if you never address the issue, what's going to happen, right? Infection can happen.
That's right.
You could, if you're having trouble with a hip, if you don't get that addressed, what's going to happen? The knee, then the ankle, then the other leg who was compensating for the weakness in this leg is going to be affected. And then the next thing you know, your back is going to be messed up. So if you don't address the issue, again, it affects every aspect of your entire life. The way that you perceive things, the way that you think, the way that you it affects every aspect of your entire life. I'm telling you. Yeah.
And this is so good. And I know we can go on for hours about this.
We really could.
But I want us to just touch on one final thing for this episode. Triggers and the emotional limitations.
Yeah.
And how do those two tie together?
Oh, my goodness. I'm trying to tell you that's a good question. Okay, so triggers as it relates, I want to talk about the emotional limitations first, and we can kind of tie in triggers, but it's really understanding what you have the capacity to carry and really cultivating and creating healthy mind spaces is all about assessing the current season of your life and doing what is necessary to support your mental and emotional wellness during that season.
Yes.
Right? So for certain seasons, depending on what's happening with you, you may not have the capacity to carry certain burdens.
Yes.
Right? And oftentimes, especially if you're a helping person and you want to, you're a person that people come to often to talk about things.
Yes.
We take on emotional burdens that we should not take on during a season. And again, the 12-year journey of infertility, one of the things that would happen is I would go hang out with someone that had children.
Yes.
And then I would come home and really be a mess. And initially was unaware, right? Until my husband brought it to my attention. And I was like, you know something? You're right. And so then I had to assess okay, if someone's inviting me somewhere, can I do it?
Can you do it?
And how long can I do it? Because I love children.
Yes.
And I would have such a wonderful time when I went and, spent time with friends and family. But then I really came back home and it really just amplified my own longing. And so there were times where I could only stay a little bit. And he would ask me, he would look at me like, you sure you want to do it? And I would say, yeah, I want to do it because I needed the interaction.
Yes.
But again, I still have to reserve my social and emotional spaces, because certain things are a trigger. And a trigger is just something that causes you to have an extreme emotional reaction. And sometimes we are unaware of our triggers. Sometimes triggers sneak up on us.
Ooh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
But part of managing trauma or part of managing your emotional healing is figuring out your triggers, right? And then you can know, okay, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do.
That's right.
This is, and sometimes I'll just stop my husband. We'll be having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, hey, something about this conversation is triggering me.
Right.
And I don't know why.
Yeah.
Let me work or let me figure this out. This is triggering me.
Yeah.
And then, have to really process and think about it, or sometimes after the fact, I'm like, something, I'm feeling a little bit emotional. What's going on with me? But it's important to be able to assess so that you can manage those triggers. That's part of promoting your own healing.
Oh, yes. And even in therapy, even with recognizing them, also coming up with a plan. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we cannot avoid them. So I have my clients, we come up with a plan.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
What are you
Yeah,
going to do when that thing
absolutely.
rears or it comes forth?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even now, as a mom of twins, coming out of a pandemic and coming out of postpartum depression,
Yeah.
I have to really pay attention to my social and emotional limitations.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tap out in a minute now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. But
he'll
that's
tell
real.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tap out in a minute. I'm like, I can't. I would love to go and do that, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, yeah.
Or, you know, I wish you hadn't committed us to such and such because I just don't have it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to talk on the phone.
Yeah.
Because I don't talk to people about their problems all day long. Yeah, yeah. I just don't have the reserve that I used to have. So really even understanding that, you know, and setting boundaries. Like, it's okay.
Oh, that's
You know,
good.
I can't show up
Yes.
for you today.
That's
You know, I
right.
really can't. You know, I'm sorry, but I just cannot have this conversation right now.
Right.
And not having to apologize for that.
Yeah. And it being okay to say that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
Well, you have shared some awesome nuggets with us today. And like I said, this can go on and on, but we will have you back.
Yes, I would love to come
Yes,
back.
to discuss, you know, further steps in this process.
Yes.
But in closing today, what would you want to leave with the audience?
Oh man. There's so much that I could leave with the audience, but I think really what's hitting home for me and what's resonating for me in this moment is understanding that emotional pain is a necessary part of life.
Yes,
It is a necessary part of life. And so there are lessons in our pain. And oftentimes we say,
yes,
we are who we are in spite of such and such. But I'm telling you, you are who you are because of such and such.
yes.
And so embrace your story, right? Every high place, every low place, embrace it. It's all part of your journey. It's all part of what makes you uniquely you. So that's what I'd say. That's what I'm leaving with.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. We are so grateful to have you on our show today. And we have the book here. I have read the book. It is awesome. All of you who know me, I'm not going to make that up. This is an honest review. This book is a must-have. So, Dr. Hugie, how can they purchase their copy and how can they connect with you on social media?
Absolutely. So on Facebook, it's Cerrissa Hugie, and you can actually like my business page, MYNDspace Mental Health Education and Consulting. You can visit www.myndspace.org, and that's MYNDSPACE. And it's also available on Amazon.com as a paperback as well as in Kindle.
All right. So once again, please support her with purchasing this book. And once again, it has been an absolute pleasure today to have you on the show. Thank you to our wonderful audience for always tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you soon.